Hi friends, my name is Cindy and I am one of the children's librarians at Portland Public Library in Portland, Maine. And today we're going to finish up our read-along of The Adventures of Sophie Mouse, a New Friend by Poppy Green and illustrated by Jennifer Bell. So when we left Sophie yesterday, Sophie was stuck in a hole in the middle of the buttercup meadow. So now we're going to find out if Owen's going to help her. Chapter 8, To the Rescue. For a minute, Sophie was so surprised she couldn't speak. Finally, she squeaked out, "Yes, it's me. I can't get out." Owen was quiet a moment. Then he said, "I have an idea. I'll lower my tail down. Grab on. I'll pull you out." "Oh," Sophie exclaimed. "Okay." Owen's head disappeared. As he turned around, he lowered his tail, down, 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 until it was within Sophie's reach. For a split second, Sophie hesitated. She was afraid to be down in the hole alone, but she was afraid to grab onto Owen, too. Then Sophie remembered how brave Owen had been on the first day of school. And here he is being brave again, thought Sophie. It's time for me to be brave too. Sophie grabbed on. She felt her feet lift up off the ground, inch by inch. Sophie rose higher and higher. She held on tight, trying not to slip, until she could reach out and grab onto the lip of the hole. Then she scrambled up and out, safe at last. "You saved me," Sophie exclaimed as she got to her feet. "Thank you." "No problem at all," Owen said bashfully. "It's no big deal." Gazing out over the buttercup patch, Sophie spotted Hattie off in the distance. Sophie waved and Hattie came running over. "I was so worried," Hattie cried, huffing and puffing. "I turned around and you were gone." She stopped, catching sight of Owen. "Oh, hi, what are you doing here?" Before Owen could answer, Sophie burst out, "Owen just saved me. I fell into this hole and he pulled me out." Hattie looked into the hole. "Oh my goodness," she said. She gave Sophie a hug. "I'm so glad you're okay." Then she beamed at Owen. "Way to go, Owen," she cried. "Quick thinking." Owen looked down at the ground. I don't know. She needed help. So I helped," he said. Just then, a voice from behind Sophie and Hattie made them jump. "Oh, here you are." Sophie and Hattie turned to see a grown-up snake towering over them. Sophie's heart skipped a beat, and Hattie reached for Sophie's hand. But then Owen said, "Oh, hi, Mom. This is Sophie Mouse and Hattie Frog." Looking again, Sophie recognized Owen's mother as the same grown-up who was waiting for him at school on the first day. "Hello, Sophie." "Hello, Hattie," Mrs. Snake said kindly. "Very nice to meet you. I'm Olivia." "Olivia," thought Sophie. "Olivia Snake? Wait a minute. It can't be. Or can it? Is she the Olivia Snake, Mom and Dad's long-lost friend?" Chapter 9, Old Friends and New Friends. "Excuse me, Olivia, I mean Mrs. Snake," said Sophie. "Did you grow up around here?" Olivia's eyes went wide in surprise. "How did you guess?" she said with a laugh. "I used to play all the time in this very buttercup patch." "With George and Lily Mouse?" Sophie asked excitedly. A speechless Olivia Snake nodded, so Sophie added, "They're my mom and dad. My mom is at her bakery right over there." She pointed toward town. "We were picking buttercups for a recipe she is trying out." Suddenly, Sophie had a great idea. They could all go back to the bakery together to surprise Mrs. Mouse. Mrs. Snake loved the idea. Hattie, Owen, and Mrs. Snake helped Sophie pick fresh buttercups to replace the ones that had scattered when she fell. Then they walked together to the bakery. Sophie and Hattie walked in first. Mrs. Mouse was happy to see them because she had started to worry. Then Olivia and Owen came in, and Mrs. Mouse nearly dropped her cookie sheet. "Oh, I'd know that face anywhere," Mrs. Mouse said. "Olivia Snake! Lily Mouse!" cried Olivia. Mrs. Mouse gave Mrs. Snake a big hug, while Sophie jumped and clapped for joy. Happy surprises were the best. "Well, this calls for a celebration," Mrs. Mouse declared. She fixed up a tray of pastries and made a pot of tea. Then the two old friends sat down at a cafe table to catch up and chat. Meanwhile, Sophie, Hattie, and Owen set up their own tea party behind the counter. They took turns sneaking pastries from the grown-ups' tray. After a few cookies, Sophie asked the question she'd been wondering all week. "Owen, how come you never came back to school?" Owen hesitated. "Well, my mom used to be a school teacher," he said. "She's teaching me at home. For now, at least." Owen looked down. "Anyway, I didn't think anyone liked me." "Oh, no," Hattie burst out. "That's not true. Not exactly." Sophie gulped, feeling embarrassed. "I think it was just, well, we were all a little nervous. None of us had ever met a snake before." She took a deep breath. "We're really sorry, Owen." Soon it was time for the snakes to leave. Sophie thanked Owen again for saving her. "Will we see you at school on Monday?" she asked. Owen moved slowly toward the door. Then he looked back at Sophie. "Maybe," he said with a smile. Chapter 10. Better Late Than Never. Sophie tapped her pencil on her desk. She stared at the clock on the schoolhouse wall. It was Monday morning. Mrs. Wise was about to start the first lesson. Owen wasn't here. Sophie looked over at Hattie, 2 desks away. They had saved the desk between them for Owen. "I thought for sure he'd come," Sophie whispered to Hattie. She slumped in her chair. "I guess I was wrong." Just then, the door swung open. A ray of sunlight fell across the classroom. Owen hurried in. "Sorry I'm late, Mrs. Wise," he said, out of breath. Sophie heard some of the students whisper in surprise, but this time it was Sophie who squeaked from happiness. She waved wildly to Owen. Hattie motioned for him to take the desk between them. He came over and sat down. "We're so glad you're here," Sophie whispered to him. She could feel everyone looking at them, including Mrs. Wise. Sophie's eyes met her teacher's. Mrs. Wise winked and smiled warmly. At recess, Sophie and Hattie led Owen outside. "What should we play?" Hattie asked. Sophie shrugged. "What do you like to do, Owen? Hopscotch?" Owen shook his head. "I'm not good at jumping," he said, "but I am good at jump rope." "Huh?" said Hattie. Owen smiled. He rested his head on the end of the bench. He propped up his tail on the base of the seesaw. Then he twirled his body around and around. "A jump rope!" Sophie and Hattie cried, laughing. Sophie hopped in and started singing. "School, school, the golden rule, spell your name and go to school. Sophie. Whoops, I didn't show you the picture. She jumped out. Hattie took her turn. Hattie. She jumped out. Liddy hopped over and asked if she could play. Then Ellie and Malcolm joined in. Ben walked up to Owen as he was twirling. "Doesn't that hurt, Owen?" Ben asked. "Nope, not at all," said Owen. "It's fun. I'll get tired after a while, but not yet. Jump in if you want." Ben smiled and jumped in. B-E-N. Before long, the whole class was playing. That evening, Sophie painted a picture using her newest color, buttercup yellow. It was a landscape of the buttercup patch under a bright orange and pink sunset. In the corner, she painted a mouse, a frog, and a snake playing together. Sophie stepped back and studied her work. She thought it was one of her best yet. Sophie smiled. She was happy because of her painting, because Owen had come back to school and everyone liked him, and most of all, because she had made a new friend. And here's her painting. The end. Ooh, and we have a peek at the next Adventures of the Sophie Mouse book. In the heart of Silver Lake Forest, a mouse, a frog, and a snake talked and played by a stream. It was just another after-school play date for Sophie Mouse and her good friends, Hattie Frog and Owen Snake. Owen was lazily draped over a low-hanging tree branch. He watched as Sophie, sitting on a rock below, drew in her sketchbook. She was adding a bee to her garden scene. "That reminds me of our field trip to see the honeybee hives," Owen said. "It was my favorite part of school this week." Mrs. Wise, their teacher at Silver Lake Elementary, had taken them to see how honey was made by the worker bees. "Want to know my favorite thing from this week?" called Hattie. She was hopping from lily pad to lily pad. It was the visit from Mrs. Wallace, the flying frog. And that was the end of the Adventures of Sophie Mouse, written by Poppy Green and illustrated by Jennifer Bell. I hope you enjoyed this really cute book. I had a really fun time reading to you. And once again, my name is Cindy, and I am one of the children's librarians at Portland Public Library in Portland, Maine. Bye-bye, friends.